So we need to talk about resilience today.
We do, yes.
One of my favourite topics when I'm doing public speaking and running workshops as well.
Definitely. And I think, define for me your definition of resilience, and then I'll define mine, and then we'll get into it.
Oh, well, it's interesting. And by the way, we really don't rehearse these conversations, but it's super interesting that you just asked me that, because when I did my talk a few weeks ago in Frankfurt, I put up the classic definition, which is our ability to bounce back after a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And then I said, we need to throw that out the window.
Okay.
Because it doesn't work anymore, because that implies there's a going back.
Mm-hmm.
But particularly in the world of work, things have changed so much and continue to change in a way that won't be reversed.
Mm-hmm.
We used to all go into the office all day, every day.
Mm-hmm.
Then we had the pandemic, and we're never going to go back. There's the odd bank that has, but we're never going to go back to a culture where everybody works all day, every day in the office.
Yes.
I think there are quite seismic changes maybe in how we have relationships now.
Mm-hmm.
There are shifts in when people have their children. There are big changes in life. There's the introduction of AI tools at work that mean there's not this idea that we just temporarily have a challenge of a war or a recession and we go back.
Mm-hmm.
We are transformed by that experience. So I now think resilience is the ability to handle those changes and challenges positively and come out the other side changed in a good way and feeling capable to take on the next challenge.
Yes. Yeah, that's great. And I think for me, coming at it from my clinical hypnotherapist point of view, interestingly, I do still see validity in what you said about like throwing out the window, because for me it's like resilience is like when you have that dip, it's how quickly you can restore to baseline. So it's how quickly you can get, but I come at it, I suppose, from like that nervous system, that place of calm. When you have that dip, how quickly can you reset yourself and just steady the ship to getting back to those really good habits, getting back to that calm state where you can thrive and move forward. It's how quickly you can ride that dip. And like you said, turn the tide from that downward trajectory back onto just resetting or an upward trajectory.
So what are the tips and tools that you give your clients to help them do that reset more quickly?
It's sometimes I feel like it's definitely just because when we're in that low place, invariably that inner voice is going to come in and be like, you shouldn't be, if we're not feeling enough complex emotions anyway, that voice will come in and be like, you shouldn't be feeling this way. You should be able to be more resilient. What would David Goggins do? You know, all the things that unhelpful voice is going to show up and say, and that's fine, because that's our primitive brain, as we talked about before, stepping in and just reminding us not to forget the potential pitfalls of that have happened, because it doesn't want us to be caught off guard again. But in terms of like the first step I say to my clients is just take a breath and acknowledge like where you are. Don't try and shut down the feelings that you're feeling, because life isn't linear. We do go up and down, and when we have that dip, if we can just take a breath and just acknowledge, okay, this is where we are, but I know I can get back to a better place. We don't need to load on those unhelpful feelings of you shouldn't feel like this, because that just compounds the downward trajectory and makes it harder for us to come back to that our resilient selves.
I love that. So there's a certain level of acceptance. Yes. I'm in a tough spot. It doesn't feel great. And accepting that and not feeling like I should feel great right now if this is tough. But then there's also something that is a bit David Goggins, which is about looking back at your history of the challenges you faced in your life and reminding yourself, I have been in a challenging place before.
Yes.
And yes, maybe I didn't feel great for a few days, a few weeks or whatever. It was a challenge, but I overcame it.
100%.
So you can both feel not great, but also remind yourself that you've overcome it, and then maybe reflect on, how did I overcome it?
Yes.
And start to use some of those tools and strategies that helped you in the past with this particular challenge.
Yes, and that's really good. And it's reflecting back at the situation that led you to the place you're at, and saying, okay, what can I learn from this? That works when we're in a calmer, less emotionally collected place. But like you say, our brain loves that real world evidence. So that looking back and seeing for the real world evidence of where we've overcome tough shit, I'm going to just say it before, is a real reminder to our brains and to ourselves that we can come back and we can do it again.
And I also think sometimes if you've gone through something really challenging, like I'm thinking of a friend who's recently lost a parent, that actually accepting that there's some really tough emotion and you need to go through it.
Yes.
And not trying. I know sometimes when there's difficult emotions, it's really easy to just try and avoid them. And sometimes we have to delay them because we're at work and we can't have a complete meltdown at our desk, for example. But actually acknowledging that there's some difficult emotions you have to go through and letting yourself go through them.
Yes.
Have a good cry, get angry.
Yes.
Express those emotions. That does sometimes accelerate you coming out the other side, I think.
Definitely. And that's about like allowing those emotions. Don't try and add on, I shouldn't be feeling like this, especially I think when it comes to grief, which is just so huge. It's like we have to do what we can to sort of get out of our own way to allow that process to develop, so we can come to a place where we can just try and accommodate this reality that we just find ourselves in, which is very different and very difficult. And there is one of my co-therapists has a lovely way about speaking about grief, if I may.
Yes.
She said it's like if you think about like lava when it comes out of a volcano, and it's like searingly hot and it's so painful to even like get near and touch, and how grief when it starts is very like that. It's so raw and intense and painful. But over time, after like the lava has come out of the volcano, it starts to cool, but it's still very intense. And when you like try and touch it, it's still very hot and it's still very painful. But over time, just granting yourself that space, and over time, naturally, the lava cools into something that's warmer, that's something that you can actually just touch to give yourself warmth and comfort as you move forward. And I thought that was a really lovely way of just like expressing how important it is that you, like you say, you express the emotions, you don't load on anything that you shouldn't feel this way, and you just allow yourself the time to move and navigate into this new reality.
Well, I think one of the ways we can not build resilience is by avoiding difficult emotions and difficult situations. And actually, one of the ways we do build resilience is confronting them when we're ready. We both love old movies.
Yeah.
And probably because of whatever old movies I look up on YouTube, a really gorgeous clip came up recently of Judy Garland interviewing Ray Bolland, who played the Scarecrow in The Wizard of Oz.
Wow.
And obviously The Wizard of Oz is an incredible film. I think it was one of the first films that was filmed in colour.
Yes.
And he said the sweetest thing in this clip. He said that his mum had told him about The Wizard of Oz and the stories in it, and the kind of teaching of The Wizard of Oz is that as humans, we're all born with a heart, a brain, and courage. And obviously that's like the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Lion. And that we have those three things. And that if we embrace all those three things, we can have a life that we love, and we can have relationships that we love. And we've got, when you think about resilience, there's the mind is the mental resilience, and the body, which we'll come on to talk about, is the physical resilience. But when he said courage, that really just touched me. And I thought that's so true, that as human beings, we can be incredibly courageous. But I think maybe we're not encouraged to be as courageous as previous generations. And courage can take lots of different forms, but it can be having the difficult conversation at work, or the difficult conversation in a relationship, or confronting and letting yourself experience a tough emotion. And when you do those things instead of avoiding them, first of all, you work through some issues more quickly. But over time doing that, you become more resilient, and then you realise that when things are difficult, I can face them head on. I don't have to avoid them. And I thought, actually, yes, a big part of resilience is, first of all, acknowledging that we as humans have a huge capacity for courage. I mean, people do amazing acts of courage all the time. But thinking about yourself as an individual, in my life, in my relationships, in my work, how can I just be that tiny little bit more courageous?
Yes.
And then that will build your confidence and resilience, and leaning into courage, I think, can really help.
Definitely. And it's like when we're building that courage, sometimes like when we see, I really love, like you say, looking on, using the internet for good, looking up those clips of people doing amazing courageous, there we go, amazing courageous things, doing those things, and then getting some some like inspiration from that, and how if it's like they're here and I'm here, it's like you said, building what is the tiniest small action that my scared self could do right now to start building that courage. Because you've come from a long lineage of history of humans, of overcoming adversity and going through really hard times, and you are no different, and that is in your soul and in your DNA. You can be that courageous person, even if you feel like right now that's not quite you.
I mean, a million years ago there were 6 different forms of, well, they weren't, Homo sapiens was one of the forms of our ancestors.
Yes.
And the Homo sapiens tribe won out of the 6 because we were the most adaptable and the most resilient. So you're absolutely right that we come from this line of unbelievably like a really resilient species. And yes, on your down day when everything feels a bit much, you might not realize that, but finding a way to channel that and say, you know what, I do actually have a real inner strength. And I think all of us who've gone through particularly challenging times in our lives will look back and say, wow, I'm quite surprised at some of the things I have withstood. Yes. And I wouldn't recommend doing them again.
No.
But I've come out the other side and gone, wow, I was able to hold things together and withstand quite a huge amount of stress. I do think there's a bit of a downside to that, though. When you do become very resilient mentally, incredibly mentally strong, firstly, you can get into a bit of a habit of being hyper independent because you feel like you can handle anything. So you do it without asking for help. The other thing is people don't notice you need help because you kind of look so competent, but also you can end up sometimes doing things that they're not aligned with your goals or what you want in life, but you almost train yourself a bit David Goggins style to just always take something on because it's challenging.
Yes.
And I've got clients that do jobs that are incredibly hard and they like that it's challenging and they lean into that because they're very resilient. But actually that job's not making them happy.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes we can overtrain ourselves to do the tough thing.
Yes.
And not recognize that that's not the right thing for us.
Exactly. And I feel like when it's having that self-awareness to reflect, is this something that brought me joy? And I think this is another good point, because it's when we do a task and we complete something, it's very easy to get into that world of like, yeah, done that, great, next thing, done that, next thing. Especially if you're like that really highly driven person, it's very important for our brains and for our overall development going forward that we even have just a tiny moment of being like, yes, actually, I did a good job. Because otherwise, if you just keep doing hard things and you never give your brains any of that chemical reward at the end of like, pat on the back, well done, we're awesome. If you don't have that moment, the more you try and do these things and you try and like slog it out and basically raw dog all these tough things, you will get to the point, your brain, it becomes harder actually, because your brain is like, well, why are we doing this? Because where's the reward? And then therefore that willpower and that motivation starts to wane, because you're doing things, you get to the end and you're like, great, next. And your brain's like, well, why would we keep, if we're doing this pattern, why are we keeping doing this if we're not getting the reward at the end?
Well, and that leads us nicely onto physical resilience, because one of the aspects of if you keep pushing yourself all the time, you might be succeeding, but you might also have a lot of stress hormones going on that can burn you out. And you know, my own experience, the reason I'm so passionate about talking about resilience is because I burnt out when I was 24. I was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome. And I went from being someone who, I went straight into work from university, very busy environment, high pace, high demand, loved it, but felt quite anxious, had a lot of imposter syndrome, felt quite stressed. I was doing a lot of exercise. I was going out a lot. You know, I was in my early 20s, probably drinking a little too much, not eating as well as I should. But I almost felt invincible. Yeah. But I didn't realize I was just running on that adrenaline of constant challenge. And then one day I went out for a run, and I used to, you know, run 10K 3 or 4 times a week. And I went out for a run, and 5 minutes into this run, I felt like my legs were made of lead and I couldn't run anymore. I dragged myself home, went to bed and stayed in bed for a week.
Wow. And
I thought I had flu. You know, when you get a proper flu, it feels like you've been hit by a truck.
Yeah.
You can't even watch TV. I lay in bed for a week. I got signed off by the doctor, dragged myself back to work, caffeinated my way through the next few weeks. And 3 weeks in, I thought, okay, I feel okay again. I'm going to go for another run. And the same thing happened. Wow. And then I started going through lots of tests with the doctors. And there were other signs. I was getting every cough and cold that went around the office. I wasn't recovering as quickly. I was relying more and more on caffeine to get through a day. And eventually the doctors did a load of tests and they said, you've got chronic fatigue syndrome, or ME. There's no cure. You need to leave your job, get an easier job, stop exercising, which I'd already done. And the only treatment we can offer you is antidepressants.
Wow.
And that was, at the time, that was the treatment. And to be honest, I'll tell you, it's quite depressing when you have no energy, you're worried you're going to lose your job. At that point, I had no social life because all I could do was go to work, and then I'd come home and I'd sleep for 10 hours a night and still be tired. But I knew that the answer wasn't antidepressants. So that took me on my journey to recovery and ending up doing a whole degree in nutritional therapy. And so I then restored my well-being, and we can talk about how. But one of the reasons I'm so passionate when I talk about resilience and I go and talk in companies about it, I don't just talk about mental toughness and mental resilience that we just spoke about. I talk about physical resilience. Because if, like me, you lose your physical resilience, you can't do anything. You can't do your job. You can't be there for your family. And that didn't just happen overnight. That would have been years that built up to that moment. So I really want, when people think about resilience, I want them to think about how they're investing in their future physical health.
Yes.
So they don't get to that point of absolute burnout. Or they can start to spot the symptoms when they're starting to run on fumes a bit.
Yes.
And know, okay, I've got to cancel a few social activities, eat a bit healthier, get a bit more sleep, dial the stress down. Because otherwise you could end up in the position I ended up in, which was absolutely no fun. The good news is I refused to listen to my doctors. I didn't go and get another job. I hung on to my job by my fingernails. And I did recover. It took 2 years for me to be able to run again. It was quite a major recovery, but I did. And then I ran up and down Mount Snowdon. So really proud of myself that I staged such a kind of big recovery. But it really taught me a big life lesson early on, that you have to take care of your physical well-being and resilience, especially if you are going to have, what I ended up having was an even more demanding senior job in a bank. If you're going to have quite a high stress job or a really busy lifestyle, or you're running around looking after a lot of kids, you need more physical resilience.
Definitely.
So you have to invest in that proactively. Don't wait until you burn out.
Yeah, and also because as well as if your everyday life requires you to basically redline every day in your mental and your physical health, when a extraordinary event comes along and does require you to step up and test your resilience, you've got no reserves left to give. So yeah, just not redlining life, I think.
Yeah, but so many people out there are running on caffeine and adrenaline, and they kind of feel what we call tired and wired. So they both can't really relax, but they're also exhausted. And those are some of the very early signs of that. What I had was adrenal burnout, but that kind of burnout and fatigue.
And don't forget as well, when you've built that habit pattern in your brain, as we talk about, it wants you to be safe but not happy. So if that is your way of operating, absolutely, that's, again, don't load anything on that. Don't be like, I've built this like blooming crumbling system which does me no good. Maybe a fair point, but at the same time, it's not then saying, it's just acknowledging, okay, I'm here. It's not going, right, okay, I've done a terrible job and I shouldn't be doing this, but just working out the gentle way forward. We're in a world which does require us to be more and what everyone else wants, especially I think women, and showing up, and you have to present your best self and you have to look amazing, and the kids have to be the best behaved and the business has to be thriving and all the rest of it. But it's like just taking a step back and saying, right, I'm going to be able to be better able to show up in a way that I want to when I feel more resilient and I have more to give. Yeah.
And when I'm coaching clients on their careers, I also talk about sometimes there are moments in your job where you have to push.
Yes.
It's a bit of a sprint, and you might have to go a couple of weeks without a lot of sleep.
Yes.
Or like my week in London, right? Crazy week in London, not enough sleep, maybe didn't eat as healthily as I should have, but I had a great experience. So there'd be moments when there are sprints, but then you need to build the rest in.
Definitely.
So I've made sure that next week's going to be a much calmer schedule, so I've got more time for sleep and relaxation. I won't be so rushed. And it's working out how do you build in those quieter weeks, or on the weekend, what do you do to really restore yourself ready for the next week? And sometimes those sprints can be like 3 months long, but then you need to go into a bit of a cruise phase.
Yes.
Like I had a client recently who they've entered the cruise phase in their job, and they're saying to me, should I be pushing for a promotion? Should I go for the next level? So we had that conversation about, do you want to do that now? Or because she has quite young children, actually would now be quite a nice time to have a cruise year.
Yes.
Where you stay at your level. It's quite easy for you to do what you do. and you're quite stable in that job, so stay there for a year and then push for the next level in a year's time.
Yes.
So it's navigating that, and it's not, I always say, don't do the whole of life like a black ski slope.
Yeah, I love that.
So I'm a very tame snowboarder.
Mm-hmm.
And I do the odd black, but I take it very easy. And I remember once a boyfriend took me on something called the wall.
Okay.
It's about as
already sounding.
Yeah. I mean, I should have been tipped off by the name. I should have thought, I'm not going to do that. Well, it's called Le Fas, but it basically means the wall. And they said, no, you'll be fine. Oh my God. And I went down this basically, like, it felt like a vertical wall. It isn't, but it felt like it on my snowboard. And I was like, and the thing is, I like a ski slope where you've got a steep bit, but then it goes flat again. So you get a bit of a break. You can even, on a snowboard, you can even sit down and take a rest. And then it goes steep again, a bit more challenging. And then there's a break. So I like it when there's challenge and rest, challenge and rest.
Yes.
The Fas is just straight all the way down. There's no break. There's no stopping. And I got to the bottom. I thought I was going to break up with him in that moment because I just thought, how could you possibly think that was enjoyable? He'd had the best time, by the way, on the Fas. And for me, I was like, but where was the break?
Yes.
Where was the break so I could recover my nervous system instead of just the sheer terror of going down this what felt like a vertical slope? And I think, don't try and do your whole life like a steep, icy black.
No.
But some people think that's what life should be.
Yes.
It's like, no, sometimes you want to just go and do a cruisy blue. That is 100% what you should be doing. And also, don't let other people, as I did, tell you how you should do it.
Yes.
My instincts told me I shouldn't go down that slope, and they were right. And sometimes we have to go, actually, no, that might be great for you. You might want to white knuckle that part of life, but I would like to do this in a calmer, more centered way. Or I'm not ready for that event, that change, that challenge at this moment.
Yes.
It's actually such a healthy, confident thing to say, thanks, but no thanks.
Exactly. And I feel like again, going back to our ancestry of humans, like we are taught that January's a great time to start all these new goals. And it's like, dude, our ancestors would have been like snoozing through the winter. It's like primary...
eating and hibernating.
Exactly. And we've kind of been sort of like, gaslit is probably the wrong word, but like we've been taught that in January we need to start brand new year, new me. But in terms of what you're saying, it's work out what sort of your seasons look like. Is it you need to do like 5 days a week and have 2 days rest, or 6 days a week and 1 day's rest? Is it once a month that you go like you pursue and work really hard and knuckle down for 3 weeks and then you have like a week off? Or like you say, is it a monthly, like every quarter you work for a certain 2-3 months and then you have a month off? What does that look like for you? What works best for you? Working out when your rest period is will help you be more resilient and also perform better in those on periods as well.
So true. The final thing I want to touch on is when I teach resilience, I put up a picture of a 2-scoop ice cream.
Yes.
With a cone. And I say, to be resilient, you need 3 elements. You need the 2 scoops of ice cream. One of them is mental resilience, which we spoke about at the very beginning. The second one is physical resilience, which we just spoke about. And the cone is your support team.
Love it.
And it is really important to have people around you who support you, to invest in those relationships so that when you need support, you have people to come to you. But also, if you invest in those relationships and spend time with those people, you're also able to support them, which is part of being in community. So I do think when we're thinking about resilience, we can tend to think too much just about ourselves. Yes. But actually, look at your relationships. Is your partnership, if you're in a romantic relationship, is that mutually supportive? If you're having a tough time, is that someone you can go to? Will they step up for you or not? That's an interesting question. And then think about, for different aspects of your life, who will you go to for practical help? Who might you go to because they're just going to give you a big hug and tell you how great you are? But really do think about not thinking when you're in a crisis, but ahead of it, thinking about, if a challenge comes up, who would I go to? And then maybe don't just suddenly ask them for help at that moment. You might anticipate it. You might say, I know next month I'm going to have a bit of a stressful time, or I'm going to be super busy. When I get there, could I call you? Would you be able to have my kids for a couple of hours? Or I might have a bit of a stressful time. Can I call you if I need to vent about it? And engaging people in advance, it gives them a chance to say yes or no. They might have a lot going on as well. And it also means that when you're in that tough spot, sometimes you don't want to be in imposition, particularly women. They go, I don't want to be in imposition. But if you've already contracted with your friends and said in advance, I might come to you for help, then you'll feel more able to ask for it when you need it.
Yes.
So I think that thinking about that support team is really important.
Yes. No woman is an island.
No. But we can feel like it sometimes.
100%. That's the thing as well, because we can feel, that is the thing. Your primitive brain as well will be like, you're all alone. Only you can sort this out. But actually, no. And even the power of just giving yourself like 3 minutes to sit down, like gaze at the garden, just sort of like do some breaths. It's like and then your brain will try and get back to, but we've got this like bonfire that we've got this real emergency we need to deal with. But actually just giving your brain time to go into its what we call the default mode network, just to tap into all that lovely knowledge and just give yourself a moment to actually just think rather than react and go straight for responding to the emergency. That is very important as well.
And I think also just if you're struggling to ask people for help, just message 3 people who you really trust. Just tell them what's going on with you. Yeah. You don't even have to ask them for anything. You can just say, hi, how are you? I've been having a bit of a stressful week because of X, Y, and Z. Mm-hmm. And then you can see how they respond and see who comes back to you and is like, well, tell me more. Yeah. And then you can respond to that person. But I think it can become dangerous from a mental health perspective when we don't tell people when we're struggling. So just getting in the habit of expressing when you're struggling to other people. Now, you don't want to be one of those people that all you ever do is message people when you're having a bad time. So make sure you're communicating with them in other situations. But that practice of not letting yourself be an island.
Yes.
I think that's so important.
Definitely.
What a great place to stop.
Exactly. I'm so pleased you're on my island.
Oh, you too, darling. And for those of you watching, apologies for the dog interruptions earlier. She didn't want us to be on our own island. No. She had FOMO.
She was like, I'm coming to the island, bitches.
Well, she is a bad bitch.
Yes, she is. She's amazing. You got to see how cute she is. I'd have her all the time here, but she's not allowed on the sofa. She's not allowed. And she would also like dominate the conversation because I would just be hugging her all the time.
So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. We love having you with us, and we look forward to seeing you next time on the BadB Podcast.
And if you've got any comments you'd like to make, or you've got any topics you'd like us to explore, we're here for you, and we want to deliver the content that actually you find valuable and helps you move forward. So any questions, any topics, anything you need, just let us know. It's an absolute pleasure to support you.